Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade, and well, in this one I'm going to be doing my Season 2 The War Within Retribution Paladin guide. As you all know, I focus mostly on Mythic Plus, so you will find extra tips for that specific type of content, but I will still cover the basic raiding builds. And with that being said, let's start with the video. Okay guys, first let's do a small summary of the core changes that happened to Retribution Paladins from Season 1 to Season 2, so you can understand the decisions we're going to be taking on gearing, talents, and all other things. Okay, so there are two huge changes that are going to define the playstyle we are going to have this season. The first one is to Hammerfall. This used to have a 1 second internal cooldown, and now it's only 0.1 seconds. And they also added a new spell that can proc it, which is Divine Hammer Hits. So Hammerfall is going to be a lot consistent. You know, Templar's Verdict, Divine Storm, and Divine Hammer Hits are going to be able to proc it, making it a source of a lot of damage, because remember, Empyrean Hammers can also splash damage with Wrathful Descent if they critically strike. Now, the second huge change that happened is the reworking of Divine Hammers. Now it's a 1 minute cooldown that costs 3 Holy Power. It still does the same thing, you know, you call Divine Hammers to spin around you. But now you can extend the duration of Divine Hammers for every Holy Power you spend by 0.5 seconds. This, in combination with the interaction that we already talked with with Hammerfall, is going to make it a really huge source of our damage. So everything we're going to be doing in this guide is going to be to further increase the power of Divine Hammers, making it so that we can spend as much Holy Power to extend the duration of this as long as we can. In theory, you can keep this thing for an indefinite period of time if you spend your Holy Power correctly and you get some lucky procs. So I hope that was a nice introduction to their guide and helps you understand what we're going to be doing here. So let's go to the next part of it. Okay guys, let's talk about talents. As we said before, Templar is the only one of the hero talents we're going to be talking about. I'm going to give you guys two builds, one for Mythic Plus, one for raiding. On the Mythic Plus one, I'm going to give you a small variation that you can make to adapt to certain specific dungeons. So let's start with the Mythic Plus one. On the Paladin side of the talent tree, there are not much changes from last season. We're still taking all of our utility plus our throughput talents. We did get some nerfs in the form of our off healing capabilities, because healing hand no longer heals depending on the percentage of our allies' health. It only heals us. So nerf for off healing still works for us, you know. We also got a small nerf on the Seal of Crusader healing, so we're no longer taking that point, in which it heals a lot less than it did before. It was just incredibly powerful. It gave your team like 6 to 8 bars of extra health. Now it's only given like 4. It's still powerful, but there's better points to spend our talents there. So this is the Paladin build that I suggest you use. Now let's go to the Retribution side. Okay, on the Retribution side of the talent tree, we are going to have some changes from Season 1 build, in which, well, like I said before, a build is going to be revolving around Divine Hammers and its interaction with Templar. So we want to generate as much Holy Power possible and use it on spenders, you know. So we're gonna focus our build on this side on those things. First change is here. Instead of using Light Justice, we're going to go with Swift Justice, so we have a Judgment cooldown that is lower. Judgment is very important for Templar, because it buffs the damage of our Empyrean Hammer. So throw Judgment as often as you can. Keep that thing on cooldown, because it is going to increase your damage a lot. The next change you're going to notice here is that we're no longer going to spam Blades of Justice, so we're no longer using the 2 charges here. We're going with just 1 charge that generates an additional Holy Bar. Since our build is going to revolve around more spenders, we want to generate as much Holy Bar as possible, and Holy Blade is going to do just that. After that, another change that is going to happen is we're no longer going to use Jurisdiction. This is going to feel a bit weird for you at first, you know, this season, because this increased the damage of our Final Verdict and the Blade of Justice by 10%, but more importantly, it gave them a range of 20 yards, which is, you know, range is something you get used to. So it's going to take a bit, you know, a few keys, so you understand a new range that is only going to be 12 yards on both Blades of Justice and Final Verdict. So should be fine without it, just get used to it. Okay, the next change that's going to happen is, since we're no longer going to be doing Blade of Justice spam, we're going to go with Holy Flames, which gives more damage to our Divine Storm, which is a spender, and this build is going to focus on that. On top of that, it increases our holy damage by 3% just flat out. Basically, everything we do is holy damage, so it's really good. And we're still having some expurgation dot applications with this, although not in the same way as Blade of Justice, because Blade of Justice applied it to everything close in just 1 blade, while Holy Flames applies it to 4 things for every Divine Storm we throw. Still gonna be good, although the applications are going to be a bit slower. Next up is obviously we have to talk about Divine Hammers. We're taking this talent always. The interaction it has with Hammerfall is just too powerful to pass up. I'm going to show you in the rotation part how you can keep this thing as often as possible, but there are going to be times where you're going to be dropping it, especially in Mythic Plus, where you have to walk to the next pack and all those things. But an incredibly powerful cooldown, you're going to have to learn to play with this. Okay, on the next part, we have Imperium Power. Imperial Legacy is no longer viable for this season. Imperium Power just gives you so many more extra Holy Power spenders. And since this build revolves on spenders, this means that this is more extensions on your Divine Hammer. So Imperium Power is going to be the way to go. On the lower part of the talent tree, almost everything is going to be the same. Your cooldown of choice is going to be Execution Sentence for most keys. There are some where Final Reckoning can give you a lot of value, but you're going to lower your single target DPS just by a bit. But the massive value that it gives in AoE pulls is really powerful. The keys that you would take Final Reckoning are Priority of the Sacred Flame, Mother Lode, Operation Floodgate, and Cirner Brew Meadery. The other ones are mostly Execution Sentence keys, but just take into account that you can actually swap from Execution Sentence if you feel that the group has enough single target damage. You can just plow AoE with Final Reckoning. And well guys, this is the build and the variation that I wanted to give you, Reckoning instead of Execution Sentence. Now let's go to the raid build. And well guys, this is the raiding build, so I'm not going to take too much time to explain it because it's the same logic as in the Mythic Plus 1. On the Paladin side of the talent tree, we're still taking all of our Paladin utility with one small change in which we're not taking Light Force Blessing because we're not going to be Divine Storming a lot in single target in raid situations. Instead of that, you can put that point anywhere you want. I normally just leave it here in Light's Revocation so I can have my bubble in emergencies without forbearance. On the Retribution side of the talent tree, like I said before, same logic as the Mythic Plus build applies. We are going to be playing towards our Divine Hammers and keeping those as long as possible. So we're going to be generating as much holy power as we can with things like Swift Justice and Holy Blade. On top of that, we are obviously going to swap the AoE talents for single target ones because, well, raiding is mostly a single target environment, taking things like Jurisdiction and Divine Arbiter. And well guys, that's the raiding build. It's a pretty generalistic build, but it can help you with, I think, all the bosses of the raid. Now let's go to the next part of the guide. Okay guys, next part of the guide is going to be stats. So stats are going to be different depending on the gear you have available, but as a general good rule of thumb, these are the stats that you want to follow. For Mythic Plus, the stat priority would be like this: Strength, Critical Strike, Mastery, Haste, Versatility. For raiding situations, these are the stats: Strength, Mastery, Crit, Haste, and Versatility. The explanation is pretty simple. For Mythic Plus, you want more crit because of its interaction it has with Imperial Hammers. Whenever they crit, they're going to splash damage, and well, Mythic Plus is very AoE centric. And for raiding, the stats that I'm going to give you, Mastery being the highest, is because, well, you don't really care that Imperial Hammers splash damage in raiding situations. You just want the Imperial Hammers to hit hard, so Mastery is going to have a bit more value. Okay guys, let's go to the next part of the guide. Okay guys, let's talk about enchantments, gems, and consumables. So let's start with enchantments. For your weapon, you want to use Stoneborn Artistry. This is just a really solid enchantment that gives you a chance of mastery on a proc. For your cloak, you want Chant of Winged Grace. This is just going to give you a nice amount of avoidance. Avoidance is good for avoiding AoE damage. Chest, you want to use your Crystalline Radiance, which is going to give you a nice amount of main stat. For your bracers, you want the Chant of Armored Avoidance. Again, avoidance is just a great stat to deal with AoE damage. For your legs, you want your Stormbound Armor Kit. This is going to give you a nice amount of main stat and extra stamina. For your boots, you have a choice between Scout's March and Defender's March. Scout's March is going to give you a nice amount of speed, and Defender's March is going to give you some extra stamina. Both are good options. For your ring, you want a combination of either Radiant Mastery or Radiant Critical Strike. Both are good choices depending on the gear you have. Okay, now let's talk about gems. So for your diamond, you want a Culminating Blasphemy. Always use one of these because they are going to give you main stat and also make your abilities do extra critical damage depending on how many different other gem colors you have. So because of that, for your other gems, you want to have at least one gem of each color. So one Onyx gem, one Emerald gem, one Ruby gem, and one Sapphire gem. So Onyx gems have Mastery as a main stat and a secondary that you can pick. Emeralds have Haste as primary. rubies have crit as primary and sapphires have versatility. Different combination of these gems are going to be very good, you know. Haste mastery, mastery crit, or crit mastery, all are valuable, you know. On the sapphire, since it's versatility main, you can use verse mastery or verse crit as well. A lot of combinations of gems that you can use. Now let's go to consumables. So for consumables, we have a lot of options here, especially on the flask department. If you are going to be only raiding, the best flask that you can use is the Flask of Alchemical Chaos. This one just gives you the most stats, while it does swap every 30 seconds. It's just really good because in raiding situations, we don't really care too much about the stat that we get. We just want a lot of it. In Mythic Plus, you do have two options. The first one being Flask of Tempered Mastery. This just gives you a ton of mastery and it's pretty decent to use. And you also have the option of Flask of Tempered Aggression. This is going to be depending on how your gear is working out for you, you know. For example, I myself use mostly Flask of Tempered Aggression because I already have a decent amount of mastery. Now, for your combat potion of choice, you want to use your Tempered Potion. Just gives you a bunch of extra secondary stats. For your weapon rune, you want to use the Algari Mana Oil, which is just going to give you critical strike and haste. For your rune, you want to use an augment rune of the crystallized augment rune. While it's kind of expensive, if you have the gold, you can use it. Okay, now for food, you have different options. You can always use your trusty Bellator's Bounty, which just gives you your highest stats, you know, but there are some foods that are a bit better. For example, I like to use the Hearty Salt Baked Seafood because it just gives me a combination of mastery and critical strike, which both are good stat for us. And well, that's pretty much all for consumables. Now let's go to the next part of the guide. Okay guys, now let's talk about embellishments, trinkets, and special gear. So first of all, embellishments. The best two embellishments that you can get are down thread linens. This one is the ones that give you critical strike whenever you are over 80% health. Other options are, if you craft a weapon first, you can use the Dark Moon Seal Ascension. That is going to give you a nice amount of stats, stacking over duration. If you are going to do that, you have to pair it with a Writhing Armor Banding. As you can see on the screen, this is just going to double the effects of the Ascension embellishment. But in both raiding and Mythic Plus, I do recommend just going for the double down thread linen. It's just going to give you an extra amount of critical strike, which is really good for us in both types of content. Okay, let's talk about trinkets now. So for our best and slot options, we have 3 trinkets. One comes from a dungeon and the other 2 come from the raid. So the one that comes from the dungeon is from Operation Floodgate, and it's called Improvised Sephorian Pacemaker. This trinket is just incredibly strong. It's just a stat stick that gives you critical strike, but it gives you on a really high uptime. So it's a great trinket for both Mythic Plus and raiding. Now the next trinkets are from the raid, therefore are a bit harder to get. So the first one comes from the One-Armed Bandit, and this is the House of Cards. This is an unused trinket that gives you main stat strength, and every 1.5 minutes is going to give you a massive amount of mastery. The mastery is variable between the 7,000 to 8,000 on a normal item level version. Obviously it's going to be higher on better versions, you know, heroic and mythic. But the good thing is that once you use the trinket, it can stack up to 3 times, and it's going to guarantee you getting a higher amount of mastery for every time you use it. So just a really strong trinket overall to pair with your cooldowns. Now the next trinket comes from Chrome King Gallowix and is the Eye of Kazan. This is a really strong trinket as well that has mastery on it and stackable main stat up to 20 stacks. And once you reach that, you also get a cantrip effect that just does damage, you know. So a really strong trinket in Mythic Plus and raiding situations, although sometimes in Mythic Plus it can be tricky to keep your stacks if the tank is going a bit slow. But if you the only problem is that, well, both of these trinkets are from raids, so it's kind of hard to get. Now we have more options for trinkets on the delve department. So delves this season have really powerful trinkets. One of them I am using, and this is called the Mechanical Core Amplifier. These are not best in slot, but can be like the next best thing. So this thing just has main stat strength and a proc of a secondary stat, either your highest or your lowest. Really solid, has around a 40 to 45% uptime in any Mythic Plus dungeon. The next options from Delves are the Suspicious Energy Drink. This is another really great trinket. Same idea, has main stat strength and a proc of secondary mastery this time. And if you are low health, it gives you a bit extra, you know. Okay, so the next trinket is going to be Spelunker's Waning Candle. This also is a really powerful trinket from Delves. It's just another stat stick that gives you main stat strength and a bunch of critical strike on a proc. And if you get near an ally when you have the proc, you can also give them some extra critical strike to them. The next trinket is the Funhouse Lens. This is an unused 1.5 minute trinket that has main stat strength, and whenever you use it, you get either critical strike or haste. Normally you want the critical strike more than haste, but haste is still a really good stat to get, and it's a really powerful unused. Now, another trinket that you can get from dungeons that's pretty decent, although not our best, is going to be the Signet of the Priori. This trinket has a 2-minute cooldown, so it's kind of clunky to use with our stuff because our cooldowns are very low, but it gives you a ton of your highest secondary stats. So in our case, normally Mythic Plus is going to be Critical Strike, and Raiding probably is going to be Mastery, but just a really solid trinket, you know, if you don't have anything else to use. Now, those are all the trinkets that I recommend, but there are some honorable mentions here. So if you're starting to gear up, you can get some conquest and get the PvP trinkets. So the Gladiator's Insignia of Alacrity and the Badge of Ferocity are pretty good starting trinkets if you don't have anything to use, you know, to start going. And they're pretty easy to get. Just get 700 conquest to get each of these. You can get that easily by just spamming some battlegrounds and maybe doing some of the quests, the weekly quests that are for PvP. And well guys, that's all for trinkets. Now let's go to special gear. Okay, special gear. So this is gear that is not necessarily a trinket, but it still is going to give you a pretty substantial boost in your damage. All this comes from the raid. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is the Jaster's Diamond. This thing is incredibly powerful. This ring might as well be another trinket because the effect it has is huge. So first of all, it's very well itemized for us, having haste and heavy mastery. And the effect is every 12 seconds you steal the highest secondary stat from one of your allies up to 10 times, so giving you a massive boost in secondary stats, and it lasts until shortly living after combat. But it has a small kind of downside where you have a 10% chance to get caught and just transfer all the accumulated stats to your ally again. So technically this is not a downside because you're never losing anything, you're just not gaining the stuff you stole, you know. So it's just an incredible piece of gear. Sadly, it's very hard to get because it's very rare and drops from the last boss of the raid. Okay, the next special gear that I wanted to talk about is the best in slots. So this is our best in slot weapon. It's funny because the name implies it, you know. So this weapon has a really powerful effect where you have a chance to gain a bunch of secondary stats for 15 seconds. You can even guarantee having those stats at the start of a pull if you go and use the unused effect that has a 2-minute cooldown where you just get your highest secondary stat for 15 seconds, no questions asked. So this weapon is just incredibly powerful. And sadly, again, it's very rare, so you might only see it from your weekly box. And the last special item that I want to talk about, we have to go back to Chrome King Galowix, and it's the Capital Punisher. This is another weapon that is really strong. This time, this one doesn't lose its secondary stats, but it has a cantrip effect, where your attacks have a very high chance to contaminate your target, 25 times dealing shadow damage. You know, it stacks, and it's really powerful in single target situations. Not that good for Mythic Plus because you probably won't have enough time to stack it on a target to be meaningful, but in raiding situations it can be really strong. So yeah, those are the special gear that are in the raid that give you some throughput. Now there is one extra special piece of gear that drops from Sproxmonger Lock and Stock, and it's the Test Pilot's Go Pack, which is a cloak that has an unused that makes you go 150% faster, and it has a 2-minute cooldown. Well, this is a special item. I wouldn't really go out of my way to get it because, well, it doesn't give you throughput, it just gives you a bit of speed. And also on the cloak slot we're normally going to have an embellishment. So yeah, it's a special piece of gear, but I wouldn't, like I said, go out of my way to get it. Anyways, those are all the special pieces of gear. Now let's go into the next part of the guide. Okay guys, and in this last part I'm going to show you 3 openers, 2 for Mythic Plus and 1 for raiding, as well as obviously the basic rotation that you should be doing so you keep your Divine Hammer spinning as long as possible. Okay guys, this is the fast Mythic Plus opener. We start with Judgment, Divine Toll. Divine Hammers, Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Light, and then just keep our rotation building and spending as much holy power as possible. This is the fast opener because, well, we start with Judgment and Divine Toll, stacking a bunch of judgments, so our Burst Empyrean hammers are going to hit like a truck. This is a bit risky sometimes because tanks maybe not have enough aggro at the start, so you might kill yourself if you do this opener too early. So just make sure the tank has enough aggro before you do it. Another thing I wanted to show here is that we're going to keep our Divine Hammer spinning for the whole duration until the cooldown comes back. So I'll leave you to watch the rest of this example, and we'll go to the next opener after. Okay, this is another opener you can use in Mythic Plus. You start with Blade of Justice, Judgment, Divine Hammers, Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Light, and then just continue red rotation as normal, spending and building as much as you can. This is what I call the slow opener, because you start with, you know, Blade of Justice, a Judgment, and then you let your auto attack give you the 5th holy power, so you can start your rotation and then use Wake of Ashes and continue like that. So this opener is a bit safer to use in certain situations if your tank is not getting aggro as fast, because you give him more time to do it. So this opener also makes it so you have always holy power after you use your Hammer of Light, because you refuel 5 holy power with Divine Toll at that point. Divine Toll also is going to hit a bit harder with this because you are going to have some Crusade stacks. So I'm also going to let you guys see how I do the rotation and keep my Divine Hammer spinning for the whole duration until the cooldown comes back. And finally, this is the standard single target opener: Blade of Justice, Divine Toll, Divine Hammers, Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Light, and then you continue your rotation as normal, trying to spend and build as much holy power as you can. So this is the standard single target opener that you're going to use for most situations. Sometimes you can add an extra Judgment at the start if you have Lust, because you're going to have enough haste for that. It just makes it so you get an extra stack of Sanctification for your Empyrean Hammers to hit hard. And as in the other 2 examples that I already give you, in single target you can also keep your Divine Hammers for the whole duration, you know, until you get the cooldown back. And I'm going to let you guys see that until the end here. And well guys, that's going to be the end of the guide. I hope it helps you reach your season goals, and if it did, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a ton. Thanks for watching, everyone.